The mother of 9-year-old Tim complains, whether it's for breakfast, lunch or dinner, my child only eats French fries with mayonnaise. If I offer him something else, he refuses to take it. The worst thing is the command tone in which he speaks to me. He then acts like a little tyrant. I often feel as if I am his slave who has to be always at his service. I'm also very worried about his eating habits, but also don't know how to change it. The mother of 7-year-old Sarah reports, Sarah only wears her favorite pink summer dress, even in winter. When I ask her to dress appropriately for the weather, she becomes totally stubborn. She behaves to me like a princess whose maid is me. Her wishes seem pointless to me. I often feel downright bullied by her. Besides, I can't let her go to school in her summer dress at temperatures close to 0 degrees, especially since I could be accused of violating my duty of care as a mother. This is how parents, especially mothers, express themselves about children whose behavior can be described as tyrannical. The parents often feel helplessly at the mercy of their child's behavior. They experience their child's desires and needs as arbitrary, do not understand why they insist that they are fulfilled, do not know how to deal with them. Hello and welcome to Good Parents. My name is Wolfgang Hirschberg. I am a specialist in child and adolescent psychiatry from Germany. The term tyrant has been used since ancient Greece and Rome for those in power who ruthlessly and arbitrarily impose their will on their subjects. Nowadays, however, the behavior of other people is sometimes referred to as tyrannical, e.g. the harassment of a boss towards his subordinates or the authoritarian approach of a father to his children. I think that even with a child, one should only speak of tyrannical behavior if this is characterized primarily by its arbitrariness and thus ultimately also senselessness, as is the case with the behavior of Tim and Sarah described above. Tyrannical children give the impression that they are mainly concerned with getting their way in order to exercise power over other people, especially family members. The behavior of these children outside the family is often largely unremarkable, but tyrannical children want to dominate their reference persons in the family, that is, to manipulate and submit them to their will. However, I would not call every child that expresses its opinion and openly expresses its wishes as tyrannical. As I have already explained in my YouTube video Education, a Child's Game, today's prevailing democratic style of education means that children express their wishes, needs and opinions much more openly and confidently than in earlier times when an authoritarian style of education was dominant. This has certainly made dealing with children more difficult and demanding for the caregivers, especially the parents. However, it would be wrong to call a child who openly expresses its wishes and needs a tyrant. In my opinion, this term should only be used for a child who is not willing to compromise but ruthlessly tries to get his way. Tyrannical behavior by children is therefore not the result of a democratic style of upbringing, because a democratic style of upbringing is definitely compatible with a child's respectful treatment of his caregivers. In addition, it is perfectly fine and in no way harmful to the child's development if the child can also bring in his own wishes and needs. If we ask our children to treat us with respect, we must of course do the same. And nothing else is meant by the expression democratic style of upbringing. Even the behavior of children who react very strongly emotionally when a fundamentally understandable wish is not fulfilled, I would not call tyrannical from the outset. It happens again and again that younger children in particular scream, romp and even throw themselves on the floor because they are angry and disappointed. A typical and frequently cited example of this is that the mother does not buy the child a candy in the supermarket, which then triggers the child's emotional reaction described above. Younger children often have trouble regulating feelings of anger and rage. They have to learn this during their development, sometimes with therapeutic help and support. Sometimes, if a child's behavior appears tyrannical, it must also be excluded that the child is suffering from a mental disorder in the narrower sense, especially an obsessive-compulsive disorder. The very stereotypical behavior in obsessive-compulsive disorder sometimes has a tyrannical character, but must nevertheless be distinguished from tyrannical behavior in the narrower sense. See my YouTube video, What to Do if my child has an obsessive-compulsive disorder (OCD), in my channel Good Parents. Let us now return to tyrannical behavior in the narrower sense. As I said, a tyrant is a person whose behavior towards his environment is characterized by arbitrariness. The tyrant is interested in making his environment feel his power by subjecting it to his will. The tyrant has no further advantage of this than the satisfaction of being able to let others feel his power. He knows the rules and is able to keep to them if he wants to. The question arises, of course, as to what the tyrannical behavior is good for, or what it brings the child, if it has no further advantage of it. Why does Tim have to insist on eating only French fries with mayonnaise when there are so many nice, tasty dishes? Why does Sarah relentlessly insist on wearing her summer dress even in the deepest winter when there are so many beautiful clothes? Why do Tim and Sarah speak to their mothers in such a disparaging tone so that they feel that they are treated like subjects? One could, of course, answer to these questions that French fries with mayonnaise is Tim's favorite food and the pink summer dress is Sarah's favorite dress, and that it is understandable that a child wants to get its favorite food or clothes. But this assessment only partly meets the problem. Children usually know and accept that they cannot always get their favorite food or wear their favorite clothes. Characteristic for the behavior of Tim and Sarah, however, is the recklessness and lack of willingness to compromise with which they bring in their wishes and needs and try to enforce them. You have to realize, and this is a fact that many parents do not like to take note of, that the relationship between parents and child always bears traits of a power struggle. Children have their own will from birth, so to speak, and try to enforce it. In principle, this is quite natural and normal because in this conflict between reference persons and child, the child sets itself apart from the parents and literally learns to develop its own individuality. Without a confrontation between parents and child, the child cannot develop its own identity. Therefore, the child needs this conflict for successful development, and for this reason it is not appropriate to spare the child the resulting conflicts. However, it is also the case that these conflicts usually remain within a framework that is acceptable for parents and children. Children do have a feeling for limits, and they can usually, more or less reluctantly, accept it if a wish or need is not fulfilled by their caregivers. With some children, however, this feeling for boundaries is lost at some point or does not develop at all. The reasons for this are manifold. On the one hand, one must not forget that the exercise of power in itself can be experienced as very pleasant and positive. Exercising power on another person can therefore be a self-reinforcing process. This means, for example, because a child has once experienced how beautiful it feels to subject the mother to its own will, the desire to do so again and again arises. However, tyrannical behavior can also be the result of a certain educational behavior on the part of the reference persons. Sometimes parents try to spare the child and thus themselves all conflicts by fulfilling the child's wishes as far as possible. It is precisely through this that a tyrannical behavior of the child can develop. To fulfill all wishes and needs of the child as far as possible also means not to set limits and ultimately to give the child no answer to its question where these limits are. This results in ever more excessive and sometimes absurd desires, whose fulfillment ultimately brings the child no advantage. Rather, these wishes are an expression of its need to experience limits. It is simply not true when it is sometimes claimed that it is quite natural that children want to live out their desires and needs without limits and boundaries. Tyrannical behavior can thus also be an expression of the child's disorientation, which has not or not sufficiently experienced the limits of its behavior. Seen this way, a child's tyrannical behavior means a challenge to its caregivers to clarify boundaries as well as to give orientation and ultimately a meaning in its life. How should caregivers deal with the tyrannical behavior of a child? Sometimes it is recommended that caregivers should react very draconianly on the behavior of the child. In the film Parents' School, for example, it is shown how food was taken away from a girl with very tyrannical eating behavior after a certain time if she did not touch it. The result was that the girl apparently became so hungry that she finally voluntarily took the food offered to her. In my opinion, such manners of dealing with the child's tyrannical behavior are difficult or impossible to implement in a domestic setting. Therefore, I think that in a domestic setting, one should first of all take the dynamics, one could also say the stress, out of the conflict with the child. Far too often it happens that parents and children are totally fixated on the power struggle resulting from the child's tyrannical behavior and then ultimately find no way out. Therefore, I advise the caregivers to first of all assess whether and to what extent a child might endanger itself through its tyrannical behavior. In the case of Tim, I do not see any immediate danger if he refuses to eat anything other than chips with mayonnaise. In this case, a long-term danger is more likely to be assumed due to the one-sided diet that is connected to Tim's eating behavior. On the other hand, Sarah's wish to wear only her summer dress and to go to school with it can of course not be given in any case by her mother, if the outside temperatures do not allow it, because this could be an immediate health hazard. In this case, the mother would have to suggest to Sarah, for example, that she may wear her summer dress in the apartment in winter as well, but under no circumstances should she leave the apartment. If Sarah accepts this as a compromise, one can initially live with it. If this is not the case, the domestic possibilities are exhausted. In this case, the parents should not be afraid to seek therapeutic help. This will usually be in outpatient therapy. However, experience shows that a child with very pronounced tyrannical behavior sometimes needs inpatient treatment in a clinic for child and adolescent psychiatry. If parents decide to do so, this should not be seen as a result of educational failure on the part of the parents, but on the contrary, as a responsible, realistic assessment of their educational possibilities and their need for help. Inpatient treatment in a clinic for child and adolescent psychiatry has the advantage that therapeutic offers can be made here that cannot be provided in an outpatient setting. If we assume that agreements can be made with a child that make behavior in the home appear acceptable, the reference persons should ask themselves and possibly also seek counseling as to which extent they need to change their educational behavior. In particular, This raises the question of whether you, as parents, need to deal more consistent with the child's behavior overall, and whether you need to formulate rules and requirements better and more clearly, so one should get away from fixing oneself only on tyrannical behavior as problem behavior. Rather, the whole way of dealing with a child should be put on the test. The goal must be to arrange the contact with the child in such a way that basic principles of the democratic style of education can be realized. The following points in particular should be mentioned here. First, we treat each other with respect. Second, this is particularly evident in the way we talk to each other. Our tone is friendly and loving. Third, only those who adhere to it have a right to be heard and to bring in their wishes, opinions, and needs. Fourth, all family members have equal rights. Fifth, equality does not mean that everyone is equal. Each person, and therefore each family member, is an independent individual with his own wishes and needs. Sixth, equality means in first line that the voice of each family member is heard and respected. Everyone can contribute to conversations in its own individual and its distinctive way, but also allows everyone else to do so. As a conclusion, the following can be stated. Sometimes it happens that the relationships between family members do not develop in the way that everyone would like them to. It is particularly problematic when family relationships become so out of balance that one family member dominates the others and submits to its will. If this is the case, one must be prepared, especially on the part of the caregivers, to work to change this and to ensure that all family members regain their rights. What exactly this commitment looks like depends on the specific family situation. In any case, it can be said that the commitment and the effort involved are worthwhile because only in this way can family relationships be rebalanced and family life become better and more satisfactory for all. And that means, above all, that tyrannical behavior from whatever side has no chance anymore. That's what I wanted to say about tyrannical behavior in the family for today. I hope you liked it and it helped you. If this is the case, please give me a like. For today I say goodbye. I wish you all the best. Goodbye.